All right, so we'll go ahead and call the school board meeting into session at this time. And as we move down through the agenda, the first item on the agenda is in section 2, approval of changes to the agenda. There are no changes, and so board members, I'm looking for a motion.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. All in favor, let's vote. Vote carries 5-0. Section 3 would be recognitions. We have none. Section 4 would be visitors. We have none. Section 5 is public comment. And this would be members of the public desiring to address the school board, and they have completed a blue card. And so at this time, I have 2 blue cards. The first one that was submitted is from Mr. Raymond Hope. Thank you, Mr. Hope. Please come forward. And Mr. McGinnis, would you outline the rules and the time frame, please?
Yes, Mr. Hope, you'll have 4 minutes to make your presentation.
Okay.
And I have a folder with stuff that I'm talking to for each other.
Secretary, please.
Okay. Dr. White and board members, I'm Raymond Hope. My address is 6071 Highway 4 West in Baker, Florida. My concerns are related to the Best and Brightest Teacher Scholarship as defined in Statute 1012-731. The reason I'm here tonight is to discuss with you that the HR Department for Okaloosa County School District has informed me that they'll be recommending that the teachers of adult career technical education students are not eligible for the Best and Brightest Scholarship. Statute 1012-731-2, the Best and Brightest statute states, there is created the Florida Best and Brightest Teacher Scholarship Program to be administered by the Department of Education. The scholarship program shall provide categorical funding for scholarships to be awarded to classroom teachers as defined in 1012-01-2A who have demonstrated a high level of academic achievement. Statute 1012-01-2A reads, classroom teachers are staff members assigned to the professional activity of instructing students in courses in classroom situations, including basic instruction, exceptional student education, career education, and adult education, including substitute teachers. The HR department is concerned that because we teach adult students, we're not considered K-12 classroom teachers. Florida Statute 1000.04 clarifies this. Statute 1000.04 states public K-12 schools. The public K-12 schools include charter schools and consist of kindergarten classes, elementary, middle, and high school grades, and special classes, virtual instruction programs, workforce education, career centers, adult, part-time, and evening schools, courses, or classes as authorized by law to be operated under the control of district school boards, and lab schools operated under the control of state universities. Last year, Herschel Lyons sent a memo to district superintendents stating that each school board should review the statute and make its own decision regarding eligibility questions. The adult career technical education teachers that I work with are reported on the Equal Employment Opportunity Report with the EEO line number 29. Secondary classroom teachers 9 through 12. Our teacher scores of highly effective, or need improvement are reported to the state with our school's MIS code, which is pre-K and 6 through 12. I'm asking that the board at this time consider including teachers of adult career technical education students as candidates for the state-funded Best and Brightest Scholarship, the same as we were last year. Thank you for your consideration on this.
Thank you, Mr. Hope. Stand by just for a moment.
Okay.
Board members, any questions or comments?
Well,
Mr. Destin?
Well,
I'm sorry.
Mr.
All right,
Walker
Mr. Walker.
well, after I've mulled over this thing at great length, and I personally, with all that I've seen and read, I, for one person, am in favor that we would honor it and allow them to be covered. And I can't see any reason, the only drawback to it, but I can see no language nowhere that indicates another district has been punished or has to pay it back. And from what I've been reading, it appears to me that they should be entitled to it if they're not, but I think the language indicates to me that I think they should be entitled and are entitled to it, and I would support us recommending that we agree to to honor them and make them eligible to receive this award. And that's how I feel.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Mr. Destin, I think maybe you.
Well, that's the material that we presented. It seemed to indicate that they're eligible. I know HR has received some material that make them somewhat not quite sure. Mr. Chambers, you and I discussed it earlier today. Any pearls of wisdom since that time for us?
Mr. Hope, if you would stand aside just for a moment, stay up there. We might have some questions. Thank you, Mr. Chambers.
Yes, sir. I'm not sure I have any pearls of wisdom. I go back to what the statute says. So the statute in 1012.01, Part 2, which comes before A, it says, instructional personnel also includes K through 12 personnel whose function provide direct support in the learning process of students. Included in the classification of instructional personnel are the following K through 12 personnel, colon. And then it gives the list of who are the following K through 12 personnel. As you know, last year we looked into this situation substantially. We talked to the Department of Education, who verbally stated that adult ed teachers and pre-KD teachers were not eligible for this scholarship, but they would not put that in writing. We did get in writing from the auditors last year after the fact, where we posed the following questions to them. We said, could you please advise Okaloosa County School District on the following? If we were to pay Best and Brightest scholarship to adult education teachers who only teach adult, no K through 12 students, would we be in the parameters of the definition of a teacher according to the statute? And in the response from the auditor, the only thing that they would say is Florida statute defines instructional personnel as any, and then they bolded K through 12, and then they bolded emphasis added for K through 12, and everywhere in their answer they bolded K through 12. So fast forward to this year, and I say no pearls of wisdom because I think Mrs. Jackson, all of us, we 100% support our adult education teachers. We 100% support our pre-KD teachers, and it's unfortunate that the state of Florida has put us in a situation where we're between what the statute says and our teachers who are phenomenal. So what we've also done is, I think you saw the email that I sent the state of Florida, the gentleman who's responsible for all of this, which is Dr. Burns, and I CC'd each of you. And what Mr. Hope believes is because we are a K through 12 institution, therefore, even though they don't teach K through 12 students, he should be considered a K through 12 instructor because he's under the umbrella of a K through 12 system. So I posed that scenario to Dr. Burns and shared with them how we value our teachers and how we would absolutely love to give this scholarship to our teachers. His only response verbally was, you have to seek legal counsel. In writing of what I sent him last week, there's no response to that. So when we spoke verbally, I said, so 67 school districts could apply this 67 different ways, and we could have 67 different actions of this scholarship. And he giggled, and that was it. So sent him this in writing, haven't received a response yet. The only thing that I can do is bring to you what I believe the statute says based on conversations with several people. And it says K through 12 personnel, colon, and then it lists exactly who those individuals are. Met with Mr. McGinnis today as well to go deeper into this, and he may have some insight in terms of other steps that we may or may not take, but as it stands right now, that's where we are.
Well, Mr. Chambers, you know, of all the years I've been with this school district, it's amazing to me that I've never known auditors, if they have a problem, I've never known them in the past to have difficulty very clearly tell Ms. Scallion, hey, you can or cannot do this. And from everything that you've just explained and everything, still, it's a heck of a note that they want to tell you something verbally, but you know, it's not worth a whole heck of a lot if they won't put it in writing. And the way I look at it is until such time as that auditor comes in and tells Miss Scallion and the superintendent that, hey, you're doing something illegal, you can't pay them and shouldn't pay them, and if you do pay them, you're gonna have to give the money back. And until they do that, I want to err on the side of the individual that I think should be covered. And it's unbelievable to me that and I appreciate all that you've done, but it's unbelievable that nobody is going to give an answer in writing, but they say, well, we think this, we think that. Well, truthfully, Mr. McGinnis, you know, we turn to Mr. McGinnis. Well, he can't rule no more than I can or you can on something like this. And the thing, I'd rather err on the part of the individual than I had to be, and until such time as Miss Scallion stands up there in that microphone, the auditor says you can't do it, and if you do it, this is what we're going to do. I'm in favor, and I think I think that's just being fair to the individuals, the teachers, and I feel very strongly about that. Huh?
And just to be
and
clear,
until somebody sends me something in writing, you know, this when they telling you, well, verbally, but they won't give it to you, well, that don't mean a thing to me. Not
Micah
one
Rogers
thing.
is the auditor.
Huh?
Micah Rogers is the
Right.
auditor who emailed me.
So you have an email response from an auditor that says what?
That says, the scholarship program shall provide categorical funding for scholarships to be awarded to the classroom teachers as defined in the statute, who have demonstrated a high level of academic achievement. Florida statute defines instructional personnel as any K through 12 bolded, emphasis added and bolded in parentheses, staff member whose function includes the provision of direct instructional services to students and also includes K through 12 bolded, personnel whose function provide direct support in the learning process of students. And I don't think necessarily what Mr. Walker, what you're saying, I don't think Mrs. Jackson and I, or any of us, disagree. 100% would love to give all of our teachers this scholarship. But when certain things are in statute that we're to follow, and we've gone above and beyond to try to get specific answers, all we can do is try to best enact the statute as we understand it.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Mr. McGinnis, we're considered a K through 12 system. Are we authorized under the law to have pre-K and to have this adult tech that we are spending money on and seem to be engaged in?
You're certainly authorized under the law to have them, and I will say, as Mr. Chambers said, I met with them this morning. I've gotten all these materials, and I've been tasked to look at this and give them an opinion, which I will work to do. There are some differences in these statutes, though, and when you're looking at statutory construction, oftentimes, you know, you have to look at the more narrow statute versus the broad one, and so there's some issues here as to whether the broader statute that describes the K-12 schools or system, you have to look at that one compared to the one dealing specifically with best and brightest and the definition of classroom teachers. And I'm not giving that opinion tonight. I'm just saying, though, there are some issues to be looked at. It is frustrating that the Department of Education will not provide the information. And even at the end of the auditor's email, if I'm not mistaken, I think they said consult your local attorney. So, I mean, the agencies that clearly should have the answer are not providing it. Okay. And so we'll have to, you know, do what we can locally. I will tell you that the interpretation the HR department has right now is not, they're not alone in that. There are districts across this state that have drawn the same conclusions, and they are not paying the adult vocational teachers or pre-K teachers. So that's not just an issue that's come up here in Okaloosa. It has been looked at in other districts, and they've come to the conclusion of the statutes that K-12 means K-12.
And are there districts that are in fact paying it?
Yes.
There are some that are paying it. Actually, I understand some,
Not as much as
Well, we
that.
did.
but keep in mind, some that are paying it I understand, not all of them, some of them have chosen to pay it from general revenue, so they won't have an audit problem if the auditors come in and say they shouldn't have paid it. So it's a mixed bag all over the state.
And you can or cannot ask for a state attorney general's opinion?
Well, and I spoke to Mr. Chambers today, and I said I'm to the point that I may very well decide that we need to ask the Attorney General for a clarification, because this is being interpreted differently in school districts all over Florida.
Very good.
And that may very well be the path that I recommend.
All right, and I know you have a point, Ms. Thrush, but one follow-up question very quickly. What's the timeline that we're operating under, Mr. Chambers?
November 1st is where, I think, is the deadline for
Yes, sir.
teachers in Okaloosa County, and then
Okay.
December 1st is our deadline to the state to give them
I see.
those names.
All right, sir, thank you. All right, Ms. Thrush?
Well,
you had something?
Mr. Chambers, I thought that I read or was told that the individuals this is affected, that most of them had agreed that if they ended up ruling against it, that they were willing to pay the money back. Did I misinterpret that?
I'm not aware of that.
Anyway, but here's the thing. What's the worst thing can happen if we get an opinion from the Attorney General? Okay, what's the worst thing can happen? That, okay, they've ruled that we shouldn't have paid it, so either then do we try to collect from the individual whatever we paid that amount, or do we just eat it like many other things? But, you know, and it's like watching the evening news this afternoon. When a school district in North Carolina disciplined a kid and thought about expelling them because a fourth grader that used the word ma'am. And they finally decided not to expel them, but made them write so many hundred times the word not to use the word ma'am. And you know, it's like a high school in Oklahoma that, you know, we have people, Mary Beth has a wonderful crew of people that tries to get her kids not to be tardy, to not be absent, etc. So now we heard that a high school has decided, and a board has decided, to fine them so much if they tardy, $250 of excessive absence. I mean, good Lord of mercy. I'll tell you one thing, is I've been around a long time, but I'm sure as hell glad that I'm leaving. And this is another example. I'd rather err on the part of the teacher and the individual, and even finally if somebody then tells us that, hey, Miss Gay, and you no longer can pay these people, do we eat what we've already paid them, or do we make them pay it back? But until that time, with everybody else doing it, and very truthfully, them auditors, they may come in here and never even open their mouth. I mean, I just can't see really why we wouldn't want to go on our employees, that we've always prided this district of wanting to take care of our employees, and this is something. The bottom word is fair, and I think it's fair for us to honor it until such time as I'm told as a board member for a couple more months that we can't do it. In a minute, if that Attorney General or whoever ever tells the finance officer that we can't do it, absolutely, I'm 100% that we'll stop doing it. But until that time, I just think we're not using good common sense. I mean, that's my own opinion.
Mr.
So
Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, Superintendent.
Rita, you go ahead, but Rita, I have a question for Rita.
As Rita's coming up here, just to apply that, so we have adult ed teachers, if we were going to end up paying something out of general revenue, we have pre-KD teachers, we have school psychologists, we have guidance counselors, we have itinerants, if we're going to pay things out of general revenue.
Well, if they're eligible, pay them.
And-
I think we treat everybody equal and the same.
And I understand the compulsion, actually the necessity of the school district proposing that we follow the law.
Well, nobody said we
I
won't.
understand, and the issue is we're having a hard time figuring out what it is, and I get that. All right, Ms. Gallen.
Rita, if I remember correctly, when we had our entrance interview with our auditors, was this question brought up in that meeting that we had with them?
Yes, there was a question as to what was the definition of K-12, and again, let me just start off by saying the auditor general is not going to give an opinion because they are the ones that come in and audit whatever statutes in place when they're doing an operational audit. So then it's a conflict of interest if they tell you what to do and then they come in and audit. So they will not give you an opinion. Probably the only place that you are going to get an opinion is for the DOE, to request DOE to ask the Attorney General to give an opinion. But yes, we did ask that question, and again, we did not get a definitive answer. However, verbally, the opinion was that the adult, or not the opinion, the conversation was that adults were not K-12 unless you potentially had one K-12 student in your class. That was what was discussed.
And one other question, just if I remember correctly, were there districts who had any audit finding because they did pay this?
I'm not certain on that. I would have to go back and
remember
look.
what he
There were
said.
some audit findings for throughout the state dealing with the best and brightest. But I cannot tell you that without going back and looking for sure.
I couldn't remember what he told us in there either, but there were some, and you're not going to get a straight answer.
It just puts the district in a
Absolutely.
precarious situation. And, you know, if the board chose to go ahead and pay those individuals, then the board would need to provide us with approval that in the event it came back to us to have to pay those funds back, that you're giving approval for that payment to be made at some future date. I think that's what would need to happen.
All right, thank you, Ms. Gallen.
Thank you.
All right, now
Rita.
we've got a public hearing, but since we're in the midst of this, I'm going to continue it. Ms. Thrush, do you have something that you wanted to add?
Well, in regards to comments that were made by Mr. Walker, and I'm just glancing at my notes, at first he mentioned there was no penalty, but then in subsequent discussion, there is a penalty in that if it was deemed that individuals, not just adult education instructors, were ineligible, the penalty is that the money would have to be returned. The other item, and I guess Ms. Gallen, is the Auditor General, if we do have findings, that does impact the school district as far as, in the past, and again, our legislature keeps making changes to what our restrictions are, but if in the past, if we had findings, it could impact when we could start school. It impacted potentially enrollment, so, again, those rules and restrictions change at the whim of our legislature. But I think we've stated multiple times in discussion, and I know last year, because we made the change for that last year, that this is really an issue with the legislature for creating a statute that was nebulous. And I've stated multiple times that I would like to much rather have the allocation that they're distributing as best and brightest, so that we can distribute it to all of our wonderful teachers like yourself, Mr. Hope, our pre-KD teachers, our itinerant teachers, and all of those other teachers that have been missing out on this. And that it's unfortunate that this is the way that our legislature wants to recognize the great instruction that we have in our 67 school districts. So I don't know if there's any thing you can address, Ms. Scallon, as far as if we did have an audit finding and how that could potentially impact the district. But I certainly hate that we're having to recognize teachers based on an SAT or ACT score.
What would happen is if we had an audit finding and they deemed or recommended in their opinion that the money was paid out incorrectly because it did not comply with statute, then it would be treated as a question cost, and the district would then need to repay the money. Again, you know, again, we want the teachers to have the money, and the state could make this real clear in 2 minutes. So unfortunately, we are all having to deal with it at the local level when it could be resolved very easily, and we are just erring on the side of caution. And again, we have no authority to make that decision, you know, because it can be a financial issue, and it would have to be the board to give us direction on whether they're willing to pay those funds in the event we have an audit finding.
The only other question I had, Ms. Scallon, real quickly was, you know, the statute states the scholarship is $6,000 a year, or $6,000 for the teacher, but it's a categorical amount, correct? So if we had an increase, are we going to receive more money if the board chose or the district chose to include pre-KD, include adult ed, and the other eligible teachers that Mr. Chambers mentioned? Are we going to receive more funds, or would we then have to take the funds that we have and spread it out among the larger number that's eligible?
And to my knowledge, the way it works is that each year in the state's budget, based on what has happened in the past year, and then of course as you get more years that you trend, they allocate X number of dollars, saying whatever, we're going to have, let's say 100 teachers. And so what they believe is, because of the evaluations, there may be, it should work out to 600. Now in the event, 100. So in the event it worked out to be 150, then what they will do is they'll prorate those dollars that they've allocated in that categorical, because they don't have an unlimited pot of money, and they have to designate so much of their budget to best and brightest.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Ms. Gallo. All right, Mr. Hope, you've been standing there patiently, and we've had a lot of conversation. I do know, I believe, that you have been in communication with the school district, and we've had information flow back and forth, and if you'd have anything to conclude with, we would hear that.
The only thing that really caught me was the same statute that Mr. Chambers was reading, where they emphasized K-12. If he had continued to finish the sentence where he was at, that's where it follows up that it also includes exceptional student education, career education, and adult education, right there in that same statute right after he left off.
And I understand your argument would be that because we're a K-12 system that would include you, and I think that's what you're saying. All right, Mr. Hope, we appreciate you coming forward.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Bryant, you had something?
Yeah, I would just want to go with what you said, Dr. White, and what you said, Ms. Thrush. The issue here is that we're constitutional law officers. We're supposed to follow the law, and we're trying to interpret the law.
Yes, absolutely.
And we can't even get anybody to tell us.
I have talked to a lot of the same people that they have, and it's frustrating.
It is. And just so you know, I can't speak for the other four, but I know it's been frustrating just trying to understand, you know, why they can't give us an answer. I mean, and
absolutely.
Ms. Scallon's right. We could have this done if they would just give us the answer.
I agree with that.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Bryant.
Another question real
Yes, sir.
quick. Frida, how much money are we talking about? Should we have to pay it back? We paid it last year, so we should have a ballpark guess, huh?
Okay, based on the 12 teachers that were currently eligible for this past year, it would be around $21,600, but then you would need to add to that the number of pre-KD teachers, and I do not know that number off the top of my head.
And we haven't voted to include them, but I would suppose we would.
Well, I mean, that would be up to the board. I mean, and again, this is an editorial, but pre-KD teachers, we actually earn FTE for pre-KD teachers. So even though it says K through 12, so you would think that if you're going to include the adult teachers, you would include the pre-KD teachers, you know.
Because we don't earn FTE for adult.
No, because they're on the WITIS system, and so they're paid. We receive funds through workforce development to run that program.
Well, I just wanted to state it so the public could understand.
I'm sorry.
'Cause, you know,
Okay.
it is complicated how, you know, all these different funding sources. So in addition to pre-KD and adult, though, you know, Mr. Chambers mentioned other possible eligible. So you get into which ones would we add and which ones wouldn't we add.
Well, at some point, we just have to keep referring back to those statutes, and even though we can't get clarification, I think some of those questions are answered in the statute, because that definition of classroom teacher does talk about direct instruction delivery, so we'd be able to probably sort out some of those positions.
And the only final observation I've made, it, having been a recipient of several Attorney General opinions in the municipal field, after reading 7 or 8 pages of what they think the law says, they always put in the part, however, this opinion is not binding.
Right.
True. I just want to, just for the record, let everyone know that Mr. Chambers and our staff, we've discussed this at length. Our desire is for everybody to get it. But we can't, I mean, it's very difficult because I don't want audit findings for us, and also I don't want to ignore what is in statute, but it's so difficult to interpret. One person sees it this way, another person sees it that way. Our desire is to reward every teacher in the district. I'm like Mr. Walker, I think they all deserve it. But it's something we're just going to have to get some kind of answer from someone so that we know what we're doing.
So our direction is, Mr. McGinnis, you're going to seek some kind of a clarification, even as far as asking for an Attorney General's
Yes, sir.
opinion?
I'm not committing that
They'll respond.
path necessary to the Attorney General, but I am committed to getting an opinion back to the district that will come to the board, and then you can make a decision what to do from there.
But we need to remember there's a timeline here.
Right,
And
November
The only
1st.
thing I'd like for this board to remember, that we don't need to do like everybody else is doing. Let's make a decision, and let me assure you, tomorrow, it won't bother me one bit whether I'm on the prevailing side or not. But let's make a decision of what we want to do, and not be like everybody else has been doing. In other words, let's put it off to the next day, and whatever. And Mr. Chambers and them has done a great job. Look, but it's not fair to them, and it's sure not fair to the people involved. And I'm prepared for this board to take action, and then because we're for sure not deliberately violating the law in any way, not any way whatsoever. And we need to stand up and be board members and make a decision and move on. And if I'm on the shallow side of this thing, it's no problem, and I promise you I'll speak to all of you tomorrow. But we need to go ahead and make a decision. I mean, we're all we're doing, we've been told that basically our attorney and us is the ones that really needs to decide. Okay, let's decide. Either do it or don't do it, and then if we do it, and then we find out we shouldn't have, then we'll make sure we stop doing it. And that's, to me, that's becomes very simple. And I'm on hush. Either we vote or don't vote, whatever y'all want to do.
What's the timeline on your coming up with an opinion on this?
Well, if we involve the Attorney General's office, it may not even meet the timeline for sending the list to
next year.
Tallahassee. But I don't know that, Mr. Justin, I have not talked to that office, and I don't really want to give that opinion until I have facts.
And I understand that part, but I think it would serve our interest well to make that request should this board and district move forward with awarding this. It certainly shows our effort
Yes, sir.
and demonstrating that there's conflict in what we're supposed to do. All right, anything else?
I'm prepared to make a motion, Mr. Chairman, at this point in time, that we vote, and if three of us decide to go ahead and do it, we do it, and then at such time as the attorney then wants to come back and get a legal opinion, till up to that time, Mr. Chambers and his department will know how to go forward. And then if we have to change things, we'll change them. But if that's legal, I don't know whether because I'm prepared to make a motion now, and if I don't get a second, fine, let's move on. I'm ready,
could
I'm
you at
ready
least-
to make a motion that we honor and pay these individuals like they've requested.
Counselor, you're trying to say something.
Yes, sir. I was going to ask the board at least give me time to the next meeting to bring you an update. I'm not saying you'll have the opinion by the next meeting, but at least at that point, you may make a more informed decision regarding where we're going and what you want to do. So if we could at least do that.
Well, in that case, I'll make a motion to place this on the next meeting's agenda.
I'll second.
I don't even think that requires a vote anymore, if I remember correctly.
It doesn't hurt to do
You've
things
got a
by
motion.
motion, there's no question.
Do you want to go ahead and do that? Motion by Mr. Destin and a second by Mr. Walker. Any discussion?
And this will just have it'll be a discussion agenda item. I do remember the last board meeting when I requested to discuss something, there was much discussion if I was allowed to do that. But we're voting to have a discussion agenda item,
Well, I
a
was just
consent
proposing that
item, or
I
just
would
under
bring-
school board member.
that I would
or
bring a
school
report back
attorney.
to the board at the
Okay.
next meeting. So I wasn't necessarily proposing discussion or not discussion, but I certainly can bring an
Tell
update
us
back to the
where we're
board.
at.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So
And
I
it-
guess that's an amendment.
Well,
It's fine with
it
me.
can be on the discussion agenda. I mean, I can give the report. That doesn't mean you have to vote on anything. I mean,
Doesn't mean we can't either.
that's exactly right.
All right, so procedurally, let's vote. Any more discussion before we vote?
Can we repeat the motion just one more time?
Yeah.
The motion is to place this item on the next meeting agenda.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so any more discussion? Let's vote. All in favor? Vote carries 5-0. All right, see you next time. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to recess this meeting. And board members, you'll have to scroll all the way down to section 17. And members of the public and audience, if you go down to 17 public hearings, we're going to go through each one of these. And some of these board members are action items. All right, so I'll call into session the public hearings, and we'll start with 17.1. Public hearing for the revision of School Board Policy 08-06 test requirements presented by Ms. Karen Peak, Program Director, Professional Services, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Is there anyone here to speak to this item tonight?
Move it.
Seeing none, motion by Mr. Walker.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? All right, hearing none, let's vote. All in favor? Carries 5-0. Moving down to 17.2, public hearing for the adoption of revised School Board Policy 08-07, requirements for instructional personnel, presented by Ms. Karen Peak, Program Director, Professional Services, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Is there anyone here to speak to this item tonight? Seeing none, motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? Carries 5-0. 17.3, public hearing for the adoption of revised School Board Policy 08-08, new teacher induction program, presented by Ms. Karen Peak, Program Director, Professional Services, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Is there anyone here to speak to this item tonight?
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? The vote is 5-0. All right, board members, 17.4 is a non-action item. Public hearing on the school district's 5-year capital outlay plan presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer. Is there anyone here to comment on this item tonight? All right, seeing none, Mr. Attorney, we'll close the public hearings. We'll move back up. We'll call back into session the regular meeting. And we're still at public comment. And so the next public comment we have is Mr. Stephen Mitchell, Destin, Florida. Mr. Mitchell, would you come forward? And I know you've been before. You've got 4 minutes. And Mr. Attorney, is there anything?
You have 4 minutes, Mr.
Yes, sir. Good evening. Certain professionals like law enforcement or teaching attract professionals who certainly don't do the job for money, based on the fact that most of the time these professionals are underpaid. They do it for the love of the profession. How many times do you hear stories from around the nation that based on not having enough money, a teacher will go into his or her own pocket to purchase material for the classroom that the school district or system could not pay for? I think it is a safe bet to say that most Okaloosa County School District teachers also do the same, and to each of them a big thank you. According to the Okaloosa County Public School Foundation website, the mission and purpose of the Okaloosa Public School Foundation is to serve as a catalyst to promote excellence in Okaloosa County schools, enhancing teaching and learning through community and private sector support for special programs. At the August 9th workshop, it was stated, quote, "Our Okaloosa Public School Foundation this week have been in almost every one of our schools asking for money, asking teachers to donate $1, $2, $5, and I was so impressed even the chairman was talking to teachers," unquote. Let me repeat part of this. Asking for money, asking teachers. The foundation website further states in part under Who Are We? As a nonprofit organization, the foundation is supported through private and corporate donations throughout the county. Board members to spike the football and brag about how the foundation was in almost every school asking teachers for money does not appear to be consistent with the foundation mission statement. Ask yourselves these questions. Is it possible that an underpaid district employee may feel awkward when approached by a foundation representative and asked to donate? Could it be considered coercion? Could teachers fear retribution for not donating? Simply put, the employees of the school district should not be placed in that position, and the foundation would be better served reaching out to the private sector, and I don't mean district employees, and the corporate world for donations. And finally, lying by omission, also known as continuing misrepresentation or quote mining, occurs when an important fact is left out in order to foster a misconception. As a suggestion, when the school district opines about how great the first day of school was, and I am sure that vast majority of the day went well, you might consider what is going to be reported in the paper the very next day, specifically that a warning sign was found atop of Baker School. After the recent scandals, the more information that the district can disseminate, the quicker credibility will be established and will prevent parents from asking, what else am I not being told? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
I just have one
Mr.
comment,
Destin, go ahead.
Chairman. I'm somewhat uncomfortable with soliciting teachers also, and because I've known many of them who take money out of their pocket on a daily basis, and it makes me uncomfortable.
Well, a point of clarification, I was not the chairman that Mr. Mitchell referred to regarding chairman.
I would like to say this.
Sure, yes,
33 years ago, we put in $2 a teacher. I know I did. And it went for student scholarships and teacher scholarships. It's been done since I've been in this district. And to me, it gives teachers an opportunity. Actually, when we went into the schools, they didn't even know what the Public School Foundation was. They asked a lot of good questions, and they said, oh, this is what provides scholarships for our students. We do get a lot of money from the public sector. We do write a lot of grants. But if we go in and ask them for United Way, we go in and ask them for everything else under the sun. I don't understand why asking teachers to give $1 toward scholarships for students and grants for teachers is an issue. It really isn't for me, because I remember 33 years ago I filled out a little paper and I gave to the United Way and I gave to the Public School Foundation. And that's when we made $16,000 a year, Mr. Walker. I didn't bring home but $724 a month, but it was important to me to support our children and support our teachers. So that's just, it's not new. It's just not new.
All right, thank you. Ms. Thrush?
Well, could you clarify, Superintendent? I mean, you just mentioned the United Way, and I know we all have, that ability that comes out of my paycheck to donate to United Way. Was the campaign that Mr. Mitchell described and that you mentioned at the last board meeting, was it to bring an awareness to our employees about the foundation, or was it to solicit donations?
I think.
And have you stated that it's a requirement?
No, in
just
no
letting
way is
them
it a
know that they
requirement.
have an option, just like they do for
Yes.
United Way, if they'd like to.
Well, one of the things that we were told, Mrs. Thrush, is that most people don't even know what the Public School Foundation does, because we had it for a while under Mr. Sansom and then it went away. And as far as the soliciting of donations, but no, we don't force teachers to do anything. Now, I have a lot of people that call me and want me to force teachers to participate in different fundraisers, and I refuse to do that, because that is a school and a teacher choice. It is not something we forced them to do, but once we explained to them and they saw how many of our kids get a 4-year ride scholarship, to me that's huge. And as a teacher, I would want to participate in that, and did. It is not mandatory by no means.
And I also want to comment that, we also told them about other options that they have to. They don't have to give $1. Did y'all know that if you get a support education license plate, anybody, that actually goes back into the school, the foundation?
And
so
several people did that.
Right. So there was different opportunities, but nothing that was said, if you don't give, shame on you.
No,
So-
not in any way.
No, there's not, Chairman, and the cause is no doubt is worthy and good, but, we have folks who are high up in the administration of the school system who are suggesting to them that perhaps they should do that.
What?
Who do we have that went to the schools?
Your board members, the foundation board members,
I understand.
are the ones who went to the schools.
Okay.
And I think, well, then we need to cut it all out.
I'm not
United
saying
Way, everybody, because that's the same thing.
that. I don't see it as the same thing, but we certainly have different opinions on that.
Yes, we do.
All right, I think we've had discussion on public comment tonight. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll move down the agenda to administrative and personnel appointments. All right, 6.1. Appointment of the Program Director for Career and Technical Education recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Ms. Jackson.
You're going to have to keep me straight.
Okay, I'll
I
try.
have a whole stack of these.
I know, you got several tonight. So this is the first one on Career and Technical.
And this one is very important to me. I used to do this job. Tonight I bring to you April Branscombe. April is definitely a success story for Okaloosa County Schools. As a lifelong Okaloosa County resident, April attended Edge Elementary, Ruckle Junior High School, and Niceville High School. After graduating high school, and this is the part I love, she was hired as the principal's confidential secretary. where in 1990 she was the first recipient of the Okaloosa County School District Non-Instructional Employee of the Year. In 1998, April earned her Bachelor of Science degree in Technical Vocational Studies, Vocational Program Development from the University of West Florida, at which time she started her teaching career at Niceville High School as a technology teacher. In 2009, April was honored to be the recipient of the Okaloosa County School District Teacher of the Year. April is married to a very supportive husband, David Branscombe, and they have one son, Taylor Jordan, who is also a product of the Okaloosa County School District and a tech sergeant in the United States Air Force. In her family, April is a first-generation college graduate and learned her work ethic from her parents, Jean and Gloria Brown, who taught her the value of hard work, integrity, and faith. And this woman has been doing this job for the last year, and just an incredible wealth of knowledge, and I would recommend her to you tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Looking for a motion.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Mr. Bryant.
I have one question, Chairman.
Okay.
I was looking at the application, and the criteria says master's degree. It also says that we can deviate from that. And Ms. Jackson, I've had nothing but good relations and good interactions with April. Can you tell me why we deviated from that requirement that was in the advertisement?
It says that we can deviate from that. There were 2 applicants. We went outside our area, and a gentleman by the name of Nathan Sparks, I don't know if you know Nathan, he's the chair of the EDC, because we wanted somebody who understood the scope of this job. I don't do these interviews. The interviews were unanimously for April. This is a complicated job, and if you don't have experience with grants and understanding CAPE funding and understanding how to implement programs, it would be very difficult for someone who did not have that experience to go into that job. So when I was given a 6-0 recommendation for April, then that's when I decided it was the right thing to do.
Is it your opinion maybe we should take that criteria
We
off?
certainly probably should, because most people coming out of industry may or may not have that. They usually have a bachelor's.
Let me interject at this time.
Yes, sir.
The 2 previous persons that's held this position
Did not have one.
have not had masters, and I
That is
discussed
correct.
with Mr. Horton today that we need to look at certain job descriptions
I
for
agree.
this, and you know, one of the difficult and I'll say bad things about education is many times the fact that you don't have that piece of paper for a certain job that really and truly, like for instance, all of you know, I'll use an example. Teresa, that was our board secretary for years, she started to work when she was still in high school.
Yes.
Well, when she left 40 years later, I can assure you that she knew more than me and everybody in this room. Unfortunately, you know, she never made a big salary because she lacked one thing, that piece of paper. And I think that we realize that the job that April has been doing, the 2 people previous to that, and that's the reason why I discussed with Mr. Horton today, that we need to look at those things, and in many cases, it may well be that that don't need to be, as Mr. Destin said, maybe, but if it's there, then I think, yes, because of the fact that when you start making exceptions, then when you look at another particular job, even though it may not apply, but I've made the motion to recommend her because I think unequivocally that she's by far the best person that applied for the job.
And I think, I don't disagree with you, Mr. Destin, that we probably do need to look at this because most folks that are in CTE come out of industry.
Yeah.
And the 2 previous program directors, one was a director and only had a bachelor's degree. So, but they were chosen for their expertise, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. So,
Well, nothing's more important than one thing. If you can do the job, and
That's
she's
right.
been doing the job.
that's right.
And
She's done it phenomenally.
is there anything else? And we made you stand there a long time waiting for the most important part. Let's vote. All in
I
favor?
waited for 2 years. 10 minutes would be okay.
All right, it carries 5-0. All right.
Thank you very
Ms.
much.
Branson?
Would you like to address the board?
Well, first of all, thank you for this confidence. I really appreciate it. I'm excited about what we're doing, the things that we have on the horizon that we're planning on doing. I want to continue promoting CTE. It is so vital to our community. Working with business and industry has been a key for us, and we're going to keep doing that, and we're going to keep promoting our students. And just as Mr. Walker said, you don't have to have that piece of paper to be successful. So thank you for your confidence. I appreciate it.
And this gentleman here with her is Mr. David Branscombe. That is her husband, and she has twin grandchildren.
Oh.
I'm so jealous of that.
I'll keep you busy.
Let's get a picture. Can we get Mr. Hurley, would you mind? Okay, Mr.
Congratulations. Yes,
Who's
ma'am,
next?
Superintendent. Let me read the next one. This will be the appointment of a program director for human resources, recommended by the superintendent.
Move it.
I'll second.
Board members,
Go ahead.
this will be the cutest one that, you know, April is very sophisticated, but the next one is just adorable and has really shocked me with her expertise, her qualifications, her ability. I would like for Miss Lindsay Maxey and her husband to join us. You want Mom and Dad up here too, and Grandma? Isn't she adorable? We're going to get a new member of the Okaloosa School District family in October. It's not long. I know.
We're scared.
You're scared. Lindsay is a proud product of Okaloosa County School District and graduated from Choctaw High School in 2008. Lindsay then attended Auburn University and received a bachelor's degree in human resources management. Lindsay worked for Jacobs Technology for 2 years as a recruiter for highly specialized engineering positions and was hired by the Okaloosa County School District as a human resources specialist in 2014. She has served as a specialist for 4 years. Lindsay holds both the Society of Human Resources Management, Certified Professional, SHRM, CP, and the Professional Human Resources, PHR certifications. Lindsay is married to her wonderful, she put in here, husband Tyler, and they are expecting their first child in October. They have to vote, Lindsay.
All right. All right, so we've got a motion and a second already before you even presented. So any discussion? Let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. Congratulations.
Thank you guys. I appreciate this. I'm looking forward to it. I love human resources. It's my passion. I really enjoy it. So I really do appreciate y'all's confidence. And yes, I will take any advice or tips because in 7 weeks I've got a baby coming. So that's gonna be a whole new. I work with adults, not children. I don't even know if we've changed a diaper.
You'll learn in a hurry.
You haven't changed a diaper?
I don't think we have. We have.
This is Dad and Mom and Grandma.
Yes.
What a joy to have y'all here tonight. And this is your first grandbaby?
It is. We're
Oh,
excited.
boy.
I have changed diapers.
I appreciate it.
Good job.
Very good. Congratulations. Okay, let me read the next one. All right, 6.3 will be the appointment of a program director for student services, discipline and athletics, recommended by the superintendent. Yes, ma'am.
Board members, I bring to you tonight Mr. Andy Johnson. Andy Johnson is, his role in our district just keeps growing and growing and growing with all of the new state mandates and the things that he is responsible for. I can't believe Andy and I are this old, but I'm going to tell you how old we are. Mr. Johnson began working for the Okaloosa County School District in 1976 at what was then called Richburg Junior High School. He was one of the first teachers in our county to teach students with learning disabilities. Later that year, he transferred to Baker School to teach 6 through 12 social studies courses. He worked at Baker School until December 2001. While at Baker, he worked as a teacher, counselor, dean of students, assistant principal, and principal. He was transferred to Crestview High School as principal in January of 2002 and worked there until he retired in January of 2007. Shortly after he retired, he became the director of Holt Academy Child Care Center for 5 years. In November 2012, Mr. Johnson applied for and was recommended by the newly elected superintendent, that's me, for the position he currently holds as a specialist in student intervention services. Mr. Johnson was awarded 2 bachelor's degrees in 1976. The first was in psychology and the second was in interdisciplinary degree in social science. He earned a master's degree in educational leadership in 1981, and he's been doing an incredible job for this school district since 2012. He's the calmest guy I've ever seen. If you need to be talked off the ledge, Mr. Johnson is your man, I can tell you. Mr. Johnson, would you and your wife? Debbie's going to kill me.
All right, board members, looking for a motion.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant. Since they're approaching, let's go ahead and let's vote. All in favor? Vote carries 5-0. Superintendent.
Excellent.
Congratulations, Mr. Johnson.
Would you like to thank the board? And this is not their son. This is our new school safety specialist. I wanted everybody to see him so they'll know who he is. This is Mr. Danny Dean.
I believe he was fishing when he was last brought before the board.
We wanted to bring him before the board before.
I want to thank the superintendent for bringing this before the board. Superintendent of arguably the highest performing and the best school district in the world.
That's right.
Yes, ma'am. And I want to thank this board for the opportunity to work and serve with you in another role, in another capacity. And I look forward to the things that are ahead of us as we continue to grow and progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
And this
Johnson.
is his lovely wife, Debbie.
Hi, Ms. Johnson.
And y'all know we got a good picture.
Time for photos.
Come on in here, a good picture. Just a quick picture.
Okay, congratulations. All right, Superintendent, you got one more. I'll read it real quick. Appointment of specialist, exceptional student education, curriculum and instruction, recommended by the superintendent for approval.
And Mr. Chairman and Board, I bring to you what I consider to be a little fireball. Every time you see this lady, she's going at warp speed. And you never hear a complaint. You never hear, I mean, I enjoy her. And she's very smart. And her name is Miss Pat Dombrowski. Although an Air Force dependent with the familiar history of mobility, Pat is a proud product of our Okaloosa school system. Having attended Oakland Heights Elementary, Max Bruner Jr. Junior High, and Fort Walton Beach High School, she has continued her education at FSU for her bachelor's, University of Miami for her master's, and University of West Florida for her specialist degree. In the ensuing 36 years, Pat has taught in several counties around the state, and in many special education settings. She's been with Okaloosa County since 1996 and has been an ESE staffing specialist for us since 2001.
All right, come forward, Ms. Dombrowski. Board members, I'm looking for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Destin.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant. Any discussion? Let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. Congratulations.
I'm not that cute. I'm not pregnant. I don't have anything to share. I don't have family members except my dear sweet boss who's come along with. So thank you for the opportunity. Thanks for your continued support for the ESE department. That means a lot to us.
And don't let her kid you. She's a fireball.
Oh, I know. I know well. All right, time for photos.
She works really, really hard.
Thank you.
Very good, and congratulations. All right, board members, I'm going to do the customary 2-minute recess in case folks have dinner arrangements. Recess.
There they go. Well, it's going to be long.
Call us back into session. Moving right along, we're under Section 7, Committee and Staff Reports. Of course, we covered these in the workshop. And then Section 8, Consent Agenda. We're looking for a motion to approve it. Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant. Any discussion? Hearing or seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. All right, let's scroll on down because it was a long one. And we come to the Section 9, the Superintendent's Human Resources Recommendations. All right, 9.1 is an information item only. It concerns employees on administrative leave, presented by Mr. Chambers, Assistant Superintendent. Item 9.2 is the request to advertise a public hearing for the adoption of a new job description, Document Data Technician, MIS, presented by Mrs. Lindsay Maxey, Specialist Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? The vote's 5-0. 9.3, request to advertise a public hearing for the adoption of a revised job description for TSA Instructional Technologist, presented by Mrs. Lindsay Maxey, Specialist Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? The vote's 5-0. Item 9.4, personnel recommendations, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction. Looking for a motion.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor. Votes 5-0. 9.5, employee transfers presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the superintendent.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Mr. Bryant. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. 9.6, employment separations presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the superintendent.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Mr. Bryant. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? 5-0. 9.7, leave without pay presented by Mr. Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, recommended by the superintendent.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Mr. Bryant. Any discussion? Let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. 9.8, reinstatement reimbursement of sick leave due to line of duty illness, injury, medical examination presented by Mr. Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, and recommended by the superintendent. Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Mr. Bryant. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. All right, discussion agenda 10.1. Of course, we spent quite some time talking about this item at the workshop on Thursday, and this is an item placed on the agenda by Mrs. Thrush. So, Ms. Thrush, at this juncture, ma'am, I'll turn it over to you.
And I won't reiterate all my comments from Thursday, but I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the review of a contract that hasn't been reviewed since 2006. And I'd like an information request from the board attorney and Ms. Jackson. If we could get a summary report, and I'm not sure if we're already receiving that summary report in regards to the number of lawsuits that the school district has, and on a historical basis, and maybe the types of lawsuits. I know we discussed different opportunities. We currently have contract services with Mr. McGinnis, and certainly other school districts larger than ours and smaller than ours do the same. Other school districts also have separate contracted services. The school board attorney and then the superintendent has a contract attorney, or sometimes the superintendent's office has an in-house general counsel. And I think I provided board members with kind of unbiased reviews of those various options. I do still feel like we need to have a defined term on our legal services agreement. Certainly there is a termination clause in that agreement, but in my review of other districts throughout the state who do have outside contracts, a majority of them have a renewal term in the agreement, either on an annual basis or like I said, on a 3-year term. And the other item that I mentioned was an evaluation of services, and I know at the workshop Mr. Bryant inquired, well, how would that work? And currently, because of the Sunshine Law requirement, if I have a concern regarding the services that the school board attorney is providing to the school board, I certainly can address that with Mr. McGinnis directly, and I have done that. And shared that with him, but we don't have an opportunity to collectively evaluate Mr. McGinnis, whether it's through an evaluation form. And I would say that if we, and I'm not proposing that we have in-house counsel, but I'm saying for our own employees that we have in-house, we do have an evaluation system. And even for contracts that we have with, a variety of vendors, certainly we review the services that those vendors or contractors are providing us. And we do have renewal terms with them and often extend contracts based on those terms in the agreements. So that's something that I certainly can again, share with board members. I know I've inquired with the Florida School Board Association on regarding other districts and how they handle evaluations of for contract of legal services. And I certainly can, provide more documentation on job descriptions or agreements, whether it's for in-house counsel or outside counsel. And just as we stated, there's 67 districts. There's different ways that different school districts handle their legal services. But I would like a review of a historical review of the lawsuits and types of lawsuits, and certainly if we're already creating some, a report that's similar to that, if that could be shared with the board.
We can get that together for you.
And would that include workman's compensation as well? Lawsuits?
Right.
Workman's compensation lawsuits?
Any,
Every category of them.
I saw it in a report.
Yeah,
We
we'll
have
get
a
it. We'll get it
report.
together.
Okay. And that's all I have to add in addition to what we discussed on
Sheriff,
Thursday.
Where are you trying to go with this? I mean, I think, it's wonderful the information you gather, but I mean, at
I'm
some
not
point,
trying
I
to
think,
go anywhere.
Mr. Chairman, I need your help here. I mean, at some point, do you wish the board to take some kind of action? We need a motion or something. I mean.
Well,
I
Mr.
mean,
Walker,
don't
if I can
understand.
interject, I really don't understand why I am treated any differently than any other
Well,
board
but I
member.
mean,
I'm sorry. I have been a very patient individual, and I really demand the same respect that other board members are given, quite frankly. I think it's our job, it's our function to discuss issues that affect the district. And certainly, lawsuits and legal counsel affect the district. And we all stated, and I certainly stated on Thursday at the workshop, that this is not a personal agenda. This is an agenda to discuss, while it might be uncomfortable, certainly we have to have uncomfortable discussions in our board budget workshops when the employees are sometimes presenting their department budget to us and we're asking them, is this really necessary? Is this position that you might be in necessary? It is uncomfortable, and I regret that it's uncomfortable, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a discussion about it.
Well, I'm not
And it doesn't
uncomfortable
mean
at all, Ms. Rush, and I may be 100% in favor of what you're mentioning, but at some point, I mean, you need to, if you put it in a motion form, then this board may 100% agree with you. But what I'm trying to say is if you feel like we need to change the way we're doing legal services.
I don't know what we need to do because I haven't received information. I'm requesting that we take time to evaluate what we've currently been doing, and maybe that's a way that we continue. Well, I have just requested from the superintendent this evening a review of historically lawsuits
if you lined
that
up and said that you wish us review this, and this, and then whether you wanted the board to look at it or Ms. Jackson to look at it, at some point, if you put it in a motion form, then Ms. Jackson or whoever would be responsible for looking at the contract or whatever, we could act on it. But we can't act, I mean, you assuming that maybe I'm against what you're suggesting, and that's not true. I don't really know until you would define it enough to where we could then make a decision whether we need to change the contract of our board attorney. Do we need to leave it like it is, or do we need to add some language to it, or whatever? But at some point, if you spelled out and made them motions, then I'd have an opportunity to address it and will probably support it. But
well,
I mean,
I've never been shy about making a motion, and I've often not received any assistance on that. So I have no problem making a motion when I'm ready to do so.
I have a question for Ms. Thrush. One item that was brought up was about reviewing the contracts.
Yes.
I talked to Mr. McInnes about this. Is it true that we, as a board, have the authority every year to evaluate your contract?
Currently, the contract, let me give this background. When that contract was originally drafted, now some 28 years ago, it was felt like that the most professional way to create this relationship was for me to serve at the pleasure of the school board. And for 28 years, that's what I've done. So the true evaluation of my services would be if there were 3 members of the board that felt like they needed to send me a message. And that's how it's been all these years. And I've been totally open to any kind of request or comments from board members over all these years. The contract already has a clause in it that says that every October there can be a renegotiation of the fees in the contract. Quite candidly, it's been some 12 years since I've asked the board to consider any change in that fee. Maybe that's bad on my part, but that's how it's been. So there is already a provision in the contract for an annual renegotiation and review in October. I have simply just not asked the board to exercise that, but it certainly doesn't stop the board from doing that.
And I was going to say, as a board, we have the authority to ask for that. And if we choose not to, then we just move on.
Yes, sir. But it is there. It's there. It's been there all these years. And I think that rate has been adjusted maybe twice in all these years, about every 8 to 10 years. But that's been the relationship with the board, has been to serve at the pleasure of the board. And to me, that's the ultimate professional evaluation, that you're at the pleasure of the board. I don't want to bind any board to saying that I have a 3-year contract and I'm owed some kind of money if I were to leave here. That's not how I operate. That's not how we've ever operated with this arrangement. So I'm certainly open to whatever the board wants to do, but I just wanted to make it clear, I've always believed that was the most professional way to operate for an attorney, and the client was to serve at the pleasure of the client, and that's what this contract does. So it's true, there's not a 2-year term to it, there's not a 10-year term to it. It has a starting term, and then it says I serve at the pleasure of the board, and either one of us can give each other 30 days notice, but there are no clauses for penalties and monies owed.
No.
And
there's the termination clause.
And there's a termination clause that tells us how to do that. But there is currently a clause saying every October we will review and renegotiate the contract. It's just that neither the board or I have chosen to do that in a number of years. So, but it's there and certainly could be exercised.
Chairman, I would suggest under Robert's rules, absent a motion, this agenda item is done.
What did you say, Mr. Dixon?
I said under Robert's rules, unless there's a motion, this agenda item is done.
Okay, so noted. All right.
Unless we want to ask more questions, though, correct?
Well, technically, under Robert's rules, you're supposed to only have discussions and questions after a motion is made, but we play that one pretty loose.
Okay.
And we talked about that when this all started.
Yeah.
Well, at a workshop,
Right.
that's different than at a meeting.
Right, but I mean about putting it on the agenda even.
Yep.
But that's fine, and I'm certainly willing to go along with the board's wishes. Okay. Anything we need to do here regarding that? Board members?
Move on.
I agree with that. All right, item 10.2, there were no items moved. Section 11, construction program owners representatives business. Program status report by the board's representative to the construction program, and that would be Mr. Walker. Mr. Walker?
Just for all of you get an opportunity, you need to go up and look at Richburg. It really is very impressive. And Ms. Jackson, I think you've been by there, and I think it's so wonderful to be able to provide that facilities for those kids. Mr. Bright, you, I know have been up several times, and I think was you not impressed with it?
I was, and so impressed I was going to put a slideshow together, but I understand Ms. Rickman's going to do that for us in the near future, so I'm going to let her do that. But it's really exciting to see what's going on up there. But we do have more opportunities, not just in that school, but around the district. So, but like you said, it's just amazing to see what those kids what they got now. So
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. All right, 11.2, task order number 21, Richburg School Renovation Project Owner Change Order, PCO 003, Change Order number 001, correction presented by Mr. Bolton, Director of Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent. Looking for a motion.
I move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Ms. Thrush. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. All right, section 12, information technology seat management, 12.1, change order 10 to the IT seat management outsourcing agreement contract modification agreement presented by Mr. Dustin Keith, specialist seat management, recommended by the superintendent.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? It's 5-0. All right, Mr. Turner, your business, sir.
Only one matter, Mr. Chairman. We have a matter in the ESE department that we need to consult with Julie Weatherly on. We have an ongoing contract with her with an established rate, and I had agreed with Ms. Summer late last week that this matter needed some input from Ms. Weatherly, and I'd just like the board to ratify that and authorize us to work with Ms. Weatherly.
So you need a motion?
Yes, sir.
I'll make a
Motion by Ms. Thrush.
Move it.
Motion by Ms. Thrush. Second by Mr. Walker. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. All right, Madam Superintendent.
I want to reiterate, yes, we did have a great start to the school year. I've been here now 5 years, 6 years. This is, I'm almost afraid to say it, but this is the smoothest start to the school year I've ever seen, and I think senior staff will concur with that. You know, other than the regular stuff you have, no huge major issues. I don't know if you've noticed, but football is here. Exciting on Friday nights. Everybody's getting ready to go play football and have a good time and bring their kids and bring their families. And I want to remind employees that if they have their badge, that they can get in free to our football games, and I think that's really important for some of them. I just want to give a shout out to Jay McGinnis and our bus drivers. Normally on the first day of school, I'm sitting at my desk looking at the phone because I know it's going to start about 9:30. You didn't pick my kid up. You didn't do that. You didn't do that. You didn't do that. So Martha and I are on the ready. I was shocked. I mean, I was truly shocked. I don't know if having a few more buses and I don't know what happened, but I think a lot of it has to do with the communication. Jay got the word out to them. Is Miss Buchanan still in here? She got everything on the website. Parents already knew. We did call outs, the whole bit, but he and his shop have done an excellent job this year. And I'm really proud of him because that is a huge undertaking for us. And that's about it. I'm going to try to get to see some football. If Mr. Walker doesn't forget to bring me my fish, I'm going to eat fish and go to a football game.
All right, Superintendent, thank you. Mr. Bryan, I'll start with you, sir, tonight.
Okay. Just one thing. I have an announcement for a student at Baker School. Mr. Walker, if you allow me to extend this courtesy to this student. Rayleigh Connor has been selected as the 2018 Youth Florida Healthcare Association Volunteer of the Year for the entire state of Florida. And Rayleigh is a senior and an honor student at Baker School. I do have to tell you some other things that she does. She goes out in the community and during Christmas time, gets toys and everything, or goodies, and takes them to nursing homes, to just around the community, just helping out. And she spearheads this, while she's at school. While she's still trying to do her schooling and all that. And she's just a wonderful, wonderful student. I've had the opportunity to meet her a couple of times. But on Thursday, I believe it's Thursday, Crestview Rehabilitation Center is going to be honoring her with this certificate. Yes. And that's it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bryant. Ms. Thrush?
And I also wanted to recognize a couple individuals and organizations. Michael Dye, the choral instructor at Niceville High School, was inducted into the 2018 Hall of Fame at the Florida Vocal Association Summer Conference this summer. He's beginning his 29th year as the choral director at Niceville High School, and as a former choral student, I'm just blown away every year by the performances of the choral groups at Niceville High School and really across the district. But we're very fortunate to have talented instructors like Mr. Dye, so congratulations to him. I also wanted to thank the Northwest Florida Track Club and Lizette and Jeff Fields. Miss Fields is an instructor at Fort Walton Beach High School, but they recently helped coordinate, along with a local business, run with it, and through the generosity of the Northwest Florida Track Club, the Josh Sprinkle Run, a 5K run, and it's great to see so many of our students. We had middle school students, high school students out there, as well as community members, but the race benefits our students in their cross-country and track programs. So just a great win-win for our students and our community, and really appreciate the efforts of the track club and Lizette and her husband Jeff for all they do for our students. And then Mr. Bryant and I were able to get to hear the beautiful piano playing of Mr. Alon Goldstein. Mr. Goldstein has been in our school district now 3 years and doing a phenomenal job of introducing our students to classical music. He's a world-renowned pianist, and through the Emerald Coast Music Alliance, we're able to have him come present and play for our students. I was at Edwin's this morning along with Miss McLaughlin, and Mr. Bryant filled in at Riverside, and tomorrow Mr. Goldstein will be performing very early at Laurel Hill School. So I wanted to thank Denise McLaughlin.
7:30 in the morning?
8 o'clock and then 9 o'clock. So he's actually doing 2 performances tomorrow at Laurel Hill. And a thank you to Playground Music Center, who's working with us to help provide some rental pianos, because not all of our schools have pianos. So the kids were just, I didn't get to talk exactly thoroughly with Mr. Bryant before the meeting, but I know at Edwin's he opened up the piano and let the kids see how the piano works as he was playing, and just they were mesmerized. So very fortunate to have that opportunity.
Yeah, the students at Riverside started stomping their feet and clapping, and the teachers were going like this. And after the performance, he's like, "Why'd y'all stop? I was enjoying that." So,
He's good. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Destin.
Chairman, I'd like to request, and I'll put it in the form of a motion, that we direct the the board attorney to look and review and make any changes necessary to the school board's policy on discrimination. I'd like to see that we have the best one in the state of Florida, and I want that there be clear direction and a rubric to the administrators and the staff members, so that they know exactly what they're supposed to do and when they're supposed to do it if that issue raises its ugly head in the future. And I will put that in the form of a motion, and I would ask him to work with Ms. Jackson or the appropriate member of her staff. And I think the attorney that works for the Norton firm that has been with us on some of those issues is Mr. Larkin.
Yes, sir.
And I would recommend that he pull him in, since he has had some experience in that arena. I'll make that in the form of a motion.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walker. Any discussion?
Well, can you state your motion? I thought we were making a request first
Well,
from the
motion is-
superintendent, but then.
Yeah, the motion is to direct the board attorney, along with Ms. Jackson and Mr. Larkin, to review our anti-discrimination policy, school board, and
So
bring
it's
it
a
up.
motion to review. Okay.
Yeah, and bring back to us changes that they feel are appropriate to make it a model in the state. And like I said, give directions to our staffs. I don't want them to be hung out and not have a clear rubric about what they're supposed to do in these situations.
Did you get that?
Yes, sir.
I think it's very important, because, I'm very, very upset about when I think that the school, Baker School did an outstanding job of how they dealt with the situation. And unfortunately, I felt like that if I'd had my way, we'd still be in court. But I agree with you 100%.
Well, we want to make sure that we do exactly what's right in future.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. We've had some discussion. Any more? All right, let's vote. All in favor? Vote carries 5-0.
Thank you, Chairman.
All right. Anything else?
That'll do it.
All right. Mr. Walker?
I've said enough. I'm through.
Well, we've been here a while tonight. Superintendent, Mr. Attorney, anything?
No, sir.
Staff, anything? All right, we're done.
See you later.
Yep, see you.
You did?
Forgot public comment.
Huh?